With the election only a week behind us, we are very pleased to be joined in studio today by Dale Nally, member of the United Conservative Party, who was recently elected MLA for the Morinville-St. Albert riding. Mr. Darcy Owen's Social 30-1 class has prepared a series of questions for him which reflect the concerns of young adults in the community. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Sydney.
Yep. One of the biggest issues on the campaign trail was the economy, so let's talk jobs first. How do you hope to increase employment opportunities for your constituents?
Great question. On a macro level, we have 173,000 unemployed Albertans. That doesn't include the ones that have stopped looking for work. It's actually a job crisis right now, and I've often referred to it as being on the death spiral because it's tough to get off of. So we have to shock our economy, if you will, back to life. And one of the strategies that we have is very aggressive, and it's our job creation strategy. And our plan is to lower taxes for job creators. And that's going to do a couple of things. One, it's going to take companies that are currently doing business in Alberta and allow them to have more money in their pocket at the end of the day so that they can expand and create more mortgage-paying jobs for Albertans. But the second thing it's going to do is going to attract business to move back to Alberta because we lost $100 billion in investment. Of that $100 billion, $50 billion of it was non-resident investment. So that means when the money's gone, there's not even a footprint of it left. So if we want to get that money back or get those jobs back, we have to be aggressive in going out there and targeting those companies. So we have a very compelling offer that is going to make a lot of those businesses want to come back to Alberta, open up shop, and create jobs for Albertans. Now that's on a macro level. On a micro level, we've got some great things going. We just need to keep promoting them. And one is the Northwest Refinery. It's currently on phase 1, which is 50,000 barrels a day. We need to get it to phase 2, and then phase 3, which is 150,000 barrels a day. My first and foremost role as an MLA is to advocate on behalf of NWR and make sure that we get that project to phase 3, where it's producing 150,000 barrels a day, because we're talking upwards of almost 10,000 jobs.
Okay. One concern raised by our Social 30 class is the possibility of the UCP repealing the minimum wage hikes that were implemented by the NDP. How do you respond to this when these benefits may affect low-income earners this year?
So, and great question. You know, we are not against raising the minimum wage. You know, back 4 years ago. Our concern was we didn't want to raise it 50% over 3 years because that creates some negative impacts to the economy, and we've seen that. We've seen that businesses haven't been able to adjust. We've seen that people that rely on this money have actually been making less. They've been taking less money home because the service industry is a great example. They used to make the majority of their money in tips, and what's happened now is they're getting less hours. People are tipping less because the cost of food has gone up, and this last one is really interesting. But servers have always had, and bartenders have always had what's called a tip out, where they tip out money to the rest of the staff that are non-front facing, so the cooks and the dishwashers. And the rate of their tip outs has actually gone up as well. So they're making significantly less money. And the feedback that we have from them is that they would like to go back to a scenario where it was 3 years ago, where they were getting more hours and could make more tips. Now, we're not making a commitment on that. What we're saying is that's the feedback that we got. We like to collaborate, so we're actually going to get experts together. We're going to get subject matter experts, people from the industry, economists, and we're going to have them study the scenario and see what is going to be the best scenario for Alberta's economy. Because we're not going to repeal the minimum wage. It's going to remain at $15 an hour, but we are going to look at, is a graduated wage in the service industry the right thing to do or not? I don't know for a fact if it is, and so we want subject matter experts to study it and tell us. Regarding people that are under the age of 18, that's actually our highest unemployment rate right now is with youths, 17 and under. And their unemployment rate is over 11%, and it's never been this high because businesses always embraced hiring high school students for part-time jobs. But they're having trouble getting work because if you can hire a 16-year-old for $15 an hour, or you can hire a 30-year-old for the same money who's got experience, you're often going to go with the person with experience. So it's actually had a negative impact on young people. And really what we're concerned about, Sydney, is just getting Albertans back to work.
Okay. One of the more unpopular moves by the NDP in the last 4 years was Bill 6, the farm and ranch workplace legislation.
Yeah.
How will the UCP deal with this, and what outcome are you and your party hoping for?
You know, great question. And this is an example of a good idea gone wrong. Because the premise behind this legislation was not wrong. The premise was farm safety. And I got to tell you, we have a 3-generation family farm. Like most people, I value farm safety. The problem is the government didn't do a great job of consulting with farmers, farm workers on this. And so what we want to do is we want to not just repeal Bill 6, but we want to replace it with better legislation that's going to address the unique interests of farmers. And quite frankly, we're going to let the farmers participate, and we're going to collaborate with them so that the final legislation that we have is really going to come from them. And they're going to have the insurance that they want to be able to offer their employees, versus Bill 6, which does not give them the same amount of choice that we're going to be showing them. So.
Okay. Let's move on to the education, which I understand is an area of passion for you, as you have a master's degree in education.
Yep.
Education funding is always a concern for us. Yep. What is the UCP plan? Is it increased spending, decreased spending, and how will this affect the quality of education in Alberta?
Great question. So we have said all along that we are going to either maintain or increase funding. And the reason we add the increase is because there are some scenarios where schools will see some extra funds. And one of the examples are rural schools. And when I say rural, I mean Morinville, and I mean the schools in Sturgeon County around. And the issue is, Sydney, that we have the same funding formula for urban and rural schools. So a brand new school in Calgary that's got twice as many students as a rural school in Alberta has the same funding model. Yet the urban school has higher reserve funds. Sometimes the rural school doesn't even have a reserve fund. The rural schools are older, they're more expensive to operate, their operational maintenance expenses are higher. So by having the same formula for funding, we actually are disadvantaging rural schools. So what we have decided to do is we are going to address this by changing the funding formula for rural schools to address the unique challenges that they have, so we can actually get enough money into the schools so that teachers and students are able to promote a quality learning environment. And I'll tell you, there's a $7 million infrastructure deficit in the schools in our riding. That's a substantial deficit. And so by adjusting the formula for these schools is going to go a long way in getting rid of that deficit.
Wow, that was a really good answer.
Yeah.
There's also concern that the UCP will reverse the post-secondary tuition freeze instituted by the previous government. Is this something that a prospective post-secondary student such as myself should be worried about?
So, we haven't done the budget. I can only tell you what our position is all along is we are not going to be doing the Ralph Klein cuts of 20 years ago, because that was 20 years ago and we're still talking about it. So the good news is, we're not going to be doing huge cuts like that. We have said all along the goal of this government is to hold the line on funding and balance the budget by growing the economy, and that's our strategy. And so our commitment is that we will maintain or increase funding to post-secondary education as well. We're not in a scenario where we're looking for cuts.
For sure. Okay. It was also announced by your party last month that they would seek to eliminate Bill 24, which requires school principals to grant student requests to form GCAs and require private schools to publicly make available policies to protect LGBTQ students. Can you comment about the rationale of this decision by your party?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and I know that it's attracted a lot of attention, and unfortunately, Sydney, there's been a lot of misinformation. So we are going to be going back to the original educational legislation that was put forward in 2014, and I believe it was Bill 12. And this was legislation that the PC government put forward that protected GSAs. It implemented GSAs because we didn't have them at that point, or at least not very many of them. So that was Bill 12. The PC government put it forward in 2014. The NDP government, or the NDP opposition at the time, actually voted in favor of the legislation. And so they were going to implement in 2015. For whatever reason, they chose not to, and they went a different route. So we're going to be going back to that original legislation because we think it's good legislation. And incidentally, not only did the NDP vote in favor of it in 2014, it's the same legislation that exists in Ontario right now. And when Catherine Wynne put this legislation in that protected GSAs, she was hailed as the hero of LGBTQ2+ rights. We announced that we're going to implement that same legislation. That's already on the books. We're just going to implement it. And of course, there was a huge uproar. And in fact, there was a lot of misinformation. And so I would just like to clarify the big difference between our two policies. Both parties agree that outing LGBTQ+2 teens is not cool. It's not something that we support. We think that teens have a right to have a safe, nurturing environment, whether it's at home and at school. They are entitled to a peer network where they should have that safe environment to be able to express themselves. So we're not on side with outing kids. The difference is, under the NDP legislation, they will not out gay teens, but it's like there's a concrete wall. So if there's a significant safety issue and that teen has mental health issues or is suicidal, that concrete wall stops them from telling the parents about what's going on. Our position is we're not going to outgate kids because that's not cool. But we don't have a concrete wall there, so if there are mental health issues, or heaven forbid if the child is suicidal, we need to engage the parents because that's a serious issue and we need to put the child's safety first. Assuming that there are no serious issues like that, we will not be informing parents. From our perspective, we don't tell parents when your kids join the chess club, we're not going to be telling them when they join the GSA.
Okay. Let's talk about something that can't be avoided in this province, oil.
Yeah.
How will the UCP get Alberta oil to market, especially when fighting an uphill battle, dealing with both the Supreme Court ruling on the Trans Mountain Pipeline and Bill C-48, which looks to ban West Coast tanker traffic? So
great questions. Listen, we are an energy province, and we have to get our energy to market. We have got, we've made huge strides in the cleanliness of our oil. We're using, less water, and it's more environmentally friendly than it's ever been before. Our carbon footprint in producing that oil has never been smaller, and the industry is continuing to make great strides. And it's something that we need to be proud of. And like I said, we have to get it to market. We've got a short window to do so because after 30 years, and it may be 20, there isn't going to be the same demand for that energy. So we anticipate that we're going to get approval to proceed with the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And we're going to do a couple of things to make sure that when we get that approval, that we're going to be able to get that pipeline built. And one of the things that we're going to do is create the Aboriginal Opportunity Corporation. And this is going to be a Crown corporation that is going to partner with Indigenous communities along the pipeline route and to give them ownership opportunities. And not just ownership into the pipeline, but all the value add that goes along with it. Because the majority of Indigenous communities, Sydney, support the pipeline, but they're just not as vocal as the small minority that don't. And by the way, the small minority that don't also have been funded by foreign fund. So you've probably heard about the Vivian Krause and the foreign funded special interests.
Yeah.
And so even that, if you go back to that last court case that shut Trans Mountain Pipeline down, that was a First Nations community that took us to court, and that whole lawsuit was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation. So that's going to absolutely stop because we'll be, in addition to having that Aboriginal Opportunity Corporation to give ownership opportunities to Indigenous communities, because we think that will get them to be vocal, raving fans, we're going to open up this war room. And the purpose of this war room is to advocate for Alberta energy. And so we are going to be taking those foreign funded special interests to court. No other country would allow the Rockefeller Corporation or the Rockefeller Foundation or any other special interest to come into Canada and try to landlock our national resource. No other country would allow that but us. So we said we're having enough. We're going to stand up. We're going to take those interests to court, and we're absolutely going to fight and make sure that we put Alberta interests first.
Okay.
There's one more thing that we're going to do as well, and this is the turn off the tap legislation. And let's be clear, this one is the nuclear option. And we don't want to do it. We prefer to collaborate. And it's our hope that we can reach out with BC, with the Premier, and we can work together collectively. That is our preference. But if we can't, we need to get this product to market, and we will use the nuclear option if we have to, and we will turn off the tap.
Okay. The other big issue tied to oil is the UCP plan to repeal the Alberta carbon tax. What's the timeline on this, and won't Alberta be slapped with the federal carbon tax afterwards, as soon as we remove it? Will this mean less provincial funding to municipalities like Morinville and fixing infrastructure like Highway 642?
So in terms of timelines, what time do you have now? I'm just kidding. It won't be that fast, but Jason Kenney has committed to repealing the carbon tax, and it's going to be Bill 1. That's how committed we are. We have referenced this time and time again as nothing more than the job-killing carbon tax, because that's what it is. It's a consumption tax. It's a transference of wealth. It's a sales tax. So we're committed to repealing that. Our concern with it is that the funds do not go into an environmental initiative that is good for the environment. It doesn't go into any carbon capture technology or renewable energy research. It goes into general revenues, and that's our issue with it. So that's why we're going to repeal it. We are going to, now there is a cost to carbon. So we're going to be taking that responsibility for the cost, and we're going to be putting it on the real emitters. So carbon will be paid for, and then we're committing to the first $100 million of the money that's generated from that, and 50% of everything thereafter is actually going to go into a special fund, so not general revenues. This fund will fund innovative research, renewable technologies, renewable energies, that type of thing. Anything to reduce the carbon footprint. And so it's going to be a real environmentally friendly initiative to actually reduce the carbon footprint in our province.
Okay. Many Albertans are concerned about some of the controversies surrounding the UCP. During Premier Kenney's victory speech on election night, he called Albertans patient and fair-minded. Yet some of the elected members of the UCP caucus have previously made controversial comments. Are you worried that this will tarnish your party, what your party is hoping to achieve economically? And do you stand by those statements as a member of the newly formed government?
Here's what I can tell you. We had some unfortunate comments. We weren't the only ones, by the way. Some of the other parties also had some candidates that made some unfortunate comments. Here's the difference. We didn't talk about it when they did it because we talked about the issues. We said all along, we're not running a negative campaign. We're not going to make this a personal campaign, and we're not going to wage a personal campaign of destruction and attack candidates, and we've stuck to that. And so when one of the other candidates said inappropriate things, it was a one-day news cycle. If it was a UCP candidate that said something unfortunate, it ended up being a 6-day news cycle. Now, I can say that a number of those candidates that did say inappropriate things were removed from the party. They were not allowed to represent the United Conservative Party banner, because quite frankly, they damaged our brand. As you know, not everyone was removed, and there was a scenario. It's difficult for me to talk about that because he's a colleague. I will say that he said some things that were inappropriate. He acknowledged that. He embarrassed himself with his comments, but he has acknowledged that they were wrong. He does not stand by them, and that certainly does not represent the values of our party. And I will just tell you more about myself, because diversity and inclusion is important to me. I was the co-chair for Diversity Edmonton. Diversity is something that I value. I marched in the Pride Parade last June, and I don't mean I attended, but I actually marched in the Pride Parade because that's something that it resonates with me and is important. I was planning on going back in June to march again, but you've probably heard that there may not be a Pride Parade in Edmonton. But diversity and inclusion is a core pillar of our party. 40% of our new candidates were women, and 16 of those candidates were new Canadians. And I'm pretty proud of that diversity. And that wasn't diversity that we achieved by appointing candidates. That was diversity by new Canadians, by women putting up their hand and saying that they were going to run and waging hard-fought nomination contests and actually winning them by outworking their opponents. I mean, we're very proud of the slate of candidates that we've offered and the diversity within it. And we want to be recognized by the breadth of our team, and not by the comments of one or two individuals, because they absolutely do not represent the brand when they say inappropriate things.
Okay, last tough question. Premier Kenney also reached out to other provinces, including Quebec, stating, "Let us work together to strengthen our shared prosperity in the Canadian Federation." How do you and your party reconcile this statement when Premier Kenney also threatened to shut off oil to British Columbia?
Great question. Here's what I'll tell you about Jason Kenney. He is an extremely smart man, and he's also very collaborative. And I was fortunate. I actually was on the United Conservative Party Roundtable for Education. So I was there when we were developing the education policy, and I got a chance firsthand to see him work. And he's not dictatorial. His approach is very collaborative. He likes to bring in experts, subject matter experts, and he likes to engage them and hear what they talk about. So he's very collaborative. And I expect Jason Kenney is going to want to work collaboratively with all the premiers of the different provinces. But I can also tell you this about Jason Kenney, is that as much as he's willing to be collaborative and as much as he's willing to reach across the country to work with other premiers, if they are going to stand in the way of us getting our national resource to market, he is going to stand up and fight. And as I said before, if that involves turning off the tap, which is the nuclear option, I know he will do it. But his first priority is to first attempt to collaborate and reach out to them and work with them. And that's our preferred approach.
For sure. Okay. As the end of the tough questions, I have a few easy rapid-fire questions just to get you to know you better. Yeah. First question, what's your favorite movie?
Oh, without a doubt, Sound of Music.
Okay. What artist is always on your playlist?
Well, this one's a little bit embarrassing, but I'm actually tone deaf. And so music doesn't instill the same energy in me as it does other people. And so I have absolutely no loyalty on the artist front, just because of just being tone deaf.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your favorite book?
Catcher in the Rye.
That one's really good.
You've read it?
Yeah,
Good.
I have.
Good. Yep.
What's your go-to comfort food?
Soft ice cream, soft serve ice cream.
Of course.
Yep.
If you could go anywhere on the planet, where would you go?
North Korea. And the reason for North Korea is because when I do travel, Sydney, I like to get off the beaten path. I don't like to go where all the tourists go. I want to find a restaurant in Marrakesh or where I'm traveling, and I want to know that I'm the only tourist in that restaurant. I want to eat where the locals eat. And North Korea is such an enigma. It's a hermit kingdom that very few people have had a chance to have had real visibility into. And I would like to see that. I would like to experience it. And I know that there's some hardships there, but you know, it would be an experience to be able to see that part of the world firsthand. Yeah.
Okay, and very last question, Avengers or Game of Thrones?
It's an easy one, Game of Thrones.
That's what everyone keeps saying. Okay, that was our last question. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.